Hello everybody and welcome to another Sponge Chat. My name is Jim. I am the blog owner of Sponge and I'd like to thank you all very much for being here. I had the pleasure to sit down with TESOL Teacher of the Year, Khanh-Duc Kuttig, and it was a pleasure to talk about her, or to listen to her talk about her experiences, both as a teacher and a teacher trainer, also working within universities and sort of the academia world, which I thought was quite interesting. I haven't really touched on with anyone so far. We got to speak about, obviously, teacher training, but she made a really, really interesting distinction between training teachers and developing teachers, which made me reflect on my training situation and think about, am I training teachers or am I developing teachers? So if you're an established teacher trainer, perhaps this is something that you can reflect on and ask yourself as well. We also looked at some book recommendations that she has, some that I haven't actually read before or hadn't heard of before, which was great. And we also touched on some points that weren't related to teacher training specifically. So we touched on native speakerism, and we also touched on perhaps problems with career pathways in EOT. And so if hopefully that's of interest to you as well. So without any further ado, I'm going to get into the Sponge Chat now. If you do like this Sponge Chat, please give us a like, comment, thumbs up. All three would be amazing, but I'll settle for one. And I'll see you for the next one. All right, guys, take care. Bye. Hi, Khanh-Duc. Welcome this morning. Thank you very much for being here. I know someone like yourself is very, very busy, and it's a pleasure to have you on Sponge Chats with us.
I'm very excited myself. It's
good.
My pleasure.
Yeah, oh, very nice. So before we get into the Sponge Chat, I suppose we should talk about the purpose why I decided to start this this video series, and it kind of all started with an email quite a while ago with someone who got in touch with me, and they said, how did I get involved in teacher training? And I came to realizing it's kind of different for every person. There's no, within EOT, no matter where you go, there's always kind of very different career path, and especially with teacher training, I think. But I've also spoken to materials developers, editors, and things like that. And so really the purpose of these chats is to speak to people that have, had quite successful careers in language teaching in various areas, such as yourself, and find how you got there pretty much, and some advice that you might have for people looking to make similar career moves. I suppose my reasons, that's one of the reasons. The second reason is to keep people within our industry. I think we lose a lot of good quality teachers to mainstream education, simply because of the lack of career opportunities or career pathways. Yeah. So I'm hoping that by sharing some of this information, we can keep some of these teachers. So let's focus on Khanh-Duc. My first question is always a very big question. The question is, who is Khanh-Duc? And so maybe we could break that down to something about you, personal you, and something professional you.
Okay, well, personal me, I think what people always ask me is, where are you from? What I get a lot is, so are you a native speaker? Well, personal me, my mother's Vietnamese, hence my first name, Khanh-Duc. My father's German, hence my last quite German sounding last name, Kuttig. And I actually grew up in Singapore. I grew up in Singapore in the 80s. I was born in the 70s, and English is my first language because with my parents, neither of them speaking each other's language, English was the language of the home. And I have to say, I'm also that proud generation of kids in Singapore who started English medium education. So we were the first batch of kids, 1980, all English medium education. And I've never actually used any other language predominantly. I learned Malay as a second language. I learned my other mother tongue, German, when I moved to Germany when I was in my 20s. So that's
Wow.
me. I think that's a burning question people always have. They kind of always look at my name and go, "Oh, where are you from?" You know, not like Jim Fuller. You know, Jim, very English sounding, or Ben, or Sam, Sarah.
Yeah.
So that's personal me, and I've been teaching since I moved to Europe. I had a stint working in Irish pubs, but clearly my language skills were better than my cooking skills. So
Well, we're glad that you came to the industry, that's for sure. Okay, it seems like there's a whole lot compressed into a minute there. And I'd like to come back to some of those things that you mentioned before. I suppose one of the first questions I have is then, why language teaching? What was the sort of the impetus to say, okay, I want to do language teaching?
to answer that, I want to ask you, have you ever actually met, or have you met many people in our industry who say, I've always wanted to make English teaching a career? Have you met many? No. So for me, no, right? And most English teachers who are not in the school system usually work abroad, work away from where they come from.
Yeah.
Similar to me, I came to Germany. I was in my mid-20s, didn't speak any German. I was studying at the university, was struggling with German, so I thought, well, I'll just study English because it's in English, can't go wrong there.
Yeah.
And as a student of very little means, I saw an ad for Berlitz. English teachers wanted, no experience necessary, no training, trainings provided, native speaker wanted. And that was my first job. That was my first, how would you say, that door opened me. I did my training with Berlitz. I was studying English language and linguistics at the time, so I put 2 and 2 together, and I thought, hey, I can do this. And the more I studied linguistics, and the less I looked elsewhere for work and for jobs, the more I got into teaching.
Interesting.
So I accidentally fell into teaching.
Yeah, I mean, I think the majority of people do. And myself included, so it was certainly not something that I expected to build a career out of, and lo and behold, here we are.
Exactly. I know so many people, they who've been living in Germany teaching now 20, 30 years, and you ask them, how did what brings you to Germany, and they go, well, I came as an exchange student, or I came just for 2 years, planning to go back to Liverpool or where not. And look at us, here we are.
Yeah. Crazy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you've been in Germany for quite a while now, so I imagine your German must be very good, no?
It's good, yeah.
It's good, yeah.
I tell my students I don't speak any German, but
right.
Yeah,
I think there's always that saying that we have amongst certain language teachers, that life is too short to learn German. Which it's scary. It's scary language. But no, I'm joking. Of course, I'm joking. Right. So you've moved into language teaching, and also you've been teaching for a very long time. But why? Oh, sorry. When and why really did the move into teacher training happen? Because it's quite a distinct. It's quite it's a very different role in a sense. I mean, you're still teaching or training, people, but it's very different, I think, in certain aspects. So when did that happen, and why?
I don't know if you remember when we had our PCE this year, and we had the forum discussion, or in one of the talks, I think it was Sue Garton's talk, where we talked about how people got into teacher training and what paths there were, and how did one actually qualify or train to become a teacher trainer.
Yeah.
And it seems like everything else in my life, I accidentally got into teacher training, because I was working at the University of Kent in Canterbury, and I was looking for I was looking to do something else to develop my career, and I saw this job advert for, you know, a lecturer at the Department of English at the university where I am currently, and I thought, yeah, I'll apply for it. So they listed the courses that they wanted people to teach. So essay writing, grammar, pronunciation, fluency, speaking courses, presentations. And I thought, yeah, I'd apply for that. And I got the job. And when I came here, then the courses were exactly as what they'd advertised and what I'd been asked to do in the interview. And it was only though when I was here that I discovered that we were actually traditionally a teacher training college.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, doesn't say much for my pre-research skills, you know, look for it. Yeah, so we're actually traditionally, our university was a teacher training college, and now, you know, with university status, we offer, most of our students are in teacher education. And in the Department of English, we've got two programs. So the BA English, like many other places in the world, and the teacher training program where students do first their BA with their two teaching subjects and education science, and then they go on to do their masters, which would be almost on par with the English PGCE.
Right. Okay.
That you do, okay, your teacher training year. And we really do split our courses. So we have the same courses for both BA English students and for teacher trainees. They just don't study together. So if I was doing the grammar course, I would do specifically grammar for English language teachers, so how to teach it, what teachers need to know, whereas for the BA students, it's more, you know, language in use kind of thing. And so because nobody actually wanted to teach grammar and nobody wanted to teach classroom language skills, that fell on me. And so again, I very elegantly slipped into this role.
Interesting. And so, I mean, it seems like you're covering quite a lot there as well. I imagine the dynamic, because you're, it seems that you're working, you're working with sort of pre-service teachers in a sense. So that must be quite an interesting change. For example, I work with in-service teachers, like in terms of the local development and sort of external workshops. So I suppose it must be quite different working with teachers that have quite a lot of theory, but perhaps less experience in a physical classroom.
Definitely, Jim. I find it actually really interesting because and I think about it all the time. You know, the difference between, say, a CELTA trainer and you know, an educator, an instructor on a teacher education program. And like you say, my students have some of the theory, so it's not, when I get them, I get them in 3 stages in their studies. I get them in their first year, I get them in their second year, and then I get them when they're in their last year. And when I see them first, they're fresh out of school, and that's quite different from a CELTA trainee, because a CELTA trainee, or even you know, like you're saying, you give in-service training. I do the same for my local teaching association. There are people who come in with experience, or there are people who, you know, have more background knowledge than these, you know, 18, 19-year-old young people who come, you know, all enthusiastic. So definitely the dynamics are different. When I get them in their first semester, they have no idea what teaching is. Their only experience of teaching is having been taught.
Right.
So they compare a lot of what I do with them with what their teachers have done with them.
Okay.
And then when I get them in their second to last semester, so in their last year, some of them would have done their obligatory practicums. They have to go, you know, for 4 weeks to a school. And so they've got a little bit more experience. They've got, a lot of them will have, you know, had courses on education science, second language acquisition, materials development, and they combine that with, you know, they reflect on it in terms of what they've learned and what they've seen in their practicums, and then they come to me and we do other stuff, and there's much greater dialogue there.
Yeah. Interesting. I've actually recently started working with teachers that have come sort of from the university background rather than from, let's say, a CELTA or a CERT TESOL background. It's interesting to see the obviously in terms of classroom experience, they're still still quite inexperienced, but in terms of the knowledge that they already bring is incredibly different to, let's say, a CELTA trainee, or fresh off CELTA or fresh out of your masters, as you would expect, right? It's interesting, but I'm not sure if the industry actually values the difference. I don't know. Obviously, I think we do, but I'm not sure if the industry does. Anyway, it's something to think about for the future, I suppose. So we've spoken about why OT, we've spoken about why teacher training. And one of my questions was actually, because I haven't actually spoken to anyone that's, well, I have spoken to people, I haven't actually spoken about it, is moving into sort of the academia, working in universities. How did that come about? And how does one start to lecture? Is it simply that something that you apply for? Is it something that you wanted to do and that's why you got into it? How does one move into academia?
Well, I never wanted to be a teacher, just to get it out there.
Put it there.
Just to put it there, I say to my students all the time that I've never wanted to be a teacher, and look at me now. Here I am. It always gets a lot of laughs because they find it unbelievable, because they're young. Like I said, they come out 18 fresh from school and they go, I want to be a teacher, and and they do this. I've taught in industry. I've taught at language schools, like I taught at Berlitz. I taught at a few other language schools. I was offered a DOS job for one of the Berlitz institutes in Germany years ago, and I think I did it for a month, and I realized that management was just not my thing. And plus, at that time, I was really still fresh in Germany, so I didn't have that much, German. I don't like. I'm not a good manager of people.
Right.
I like working with people, but I don't like confrontation. I don't like controversy. Just let me do my teaching. So university teaching, I don't know if it's the same everywhere.
Right.
You see a job ad and you apply for it.
Okay.
The bar is a lot higher, I think. I mean, you see jobs on TEFL.com or other sites that are looking for English teachers, and you need a CELTA and a master's, but and experience with whatever age range. With university teaching, yes, definitely you need to have something more than a CELTA. Nowadays in Germany, they also expect you to have an MA, ideally also C1 proficiency in English if you're not a native speaker. Also at least B1, B2 in German because of the context that you'll be working in. I've seen jobs in the USA as well for instructors. They call them instructors. So you're not a lecturer, you're instructors. You can teach English on an intensive English program in the USA. You have providers like Into, who have institutes at various Chinese universities that also look for instructors. So it's not so difficult to get in, but the question is really, once you're in, what do you do? And I think that's where the difference is. That's where the difference lies between, a lecturer who in linguistics at a British university or at a German university in Germany. You go in through first you're a PhD student, then you're a postdoctoral student, and then you apply for other more permanent jobs. Whereas when you're an English language instructor / lecturer, I think career development is very much a personal thing. So you develop your own career.
Actually, I was recently, maybe 2 days ago, I was watching an interview with Teresa Beswick and I forget his name. Mark Carver, not
Mark Carver.
Carver from
Mark
St
Carver?
Andrews, from St
Yeah,
Andrews. No, yeah,
yeah.
and he was talking about you know, quality training and quality development within English language teaching. And one of the parts that he was talking about was how, like in certain, like even in Scotland, he was talking about being a language teacher is not recognized as the same as being a teacher. So for like getting funding and things like that, it's not the same. And I think that's, you know, and he's like, that's pretty crazy, right? We have quite a very large industry. Is that,
Yeah.
you know, and so I think that's a problem that we do face. You know, everything, and perhaps that's the reason why we have such, I'm going to say, unprofessionalism within them, because it's much more of an industry than it is an educational sector.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think, sorry to interrupt. I think also, to add to that, I do wonder sometimes whether it's the image that we have as university lecturers, because I hear that from other people here in Germany as well, you know, and many people have followed the same journey as I have. You know, you land into teaching, you come here for 2 years, you know, you don't plan to stay, but then you've landed in it, and you've landed in it on the basis of your, you know, just of English being your first language back then in the 90s.
Yeah.
You know, you've just landed in it, and we've taken you. We're grateful for that. And perhaps the same elsewhere. I mean, where in my previous job in Canterbury, we were called EAP tutors.
Right.
And the only way up was through management. So you could be, you know, a program manager or program leader. It didn't matter whether you'd done a PhD or not, you know. It was, you were encouraged to do an MA because it, you know, the perception was that MA and TESOLs were relevant to the job that we were doing. And nowadays, you know, the choice of MAs is really wide, you know, MA in learning technology, in EAP, in academic writing. A PhD wasn't frowned upon, but, you know, if you did it, it was nice, well and good, you do it. The same as where I am, you do a PhD, but it doesn't, you're still the language teacher, put it that way, or you're still the EAP tutor.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Like what, in that same talk that Mark was giving, he was saying, you know, teachers need to evaluate the value of doing an MA. In terms of, he was saying that people that do an MA usually get a job, they always get a job after, but it's, does that MA equate to having a better job, or does it lead you to better, you know, career opportunities?
Yeah.
And, you know, in my mind, I'm thinking, because I'm doing my MA at the moment, but I love my job.
Don't give up.
Yeah, I love my job, but you know, I'm not looking for anything else at the moment. But my expectation would be having that MA should qualify me for more prestigious jobs, right?
But what is a more prestigious job?
But I don't know, like you would expect.
Because I've not seen any other more prestigious jobs. I think.
Good point.
I mean, I hear a lot of people who say to me, wow, you're at university. That for them is already prestigious. So the move up from
that to
you know,
me
that
sounds,
temporary language teacher at a language school, or maybe first you're at Berlitz and then you go into corporate training, you know, you're freelance, you've got your own clients. That's also a move up, right? But you have to work to get those clients. And I do wonder sometimes whether, you know, clients, corporate training, whether it matters to them that whether you have an MA or a PhD. You know, what a lot of the time what they look for is, you know, does this person know our industry? Does this person know what I'm doing? If you're doing, you know, English for engineers, but you're a lawyer and you say, my last 16 years I worked as a lawyer, now I'm going to English language teaching. Here I am, I'm going to do some English for engineering courses with you, whatever company. They're going to look at you and they're going to say, I'm not sure if we're a good fit.
Yeah.
Right. So you move through these various stages, and I think a lot of people get their first university experience if they're in the UK, maybe through pre-sessional courses.
Yeah.
Those intensive courses that you do over the summer, and that's the door in, the foot in, they put it on their CV, and then they go to, you know, and I know many who, for them, the cherry on top is really you know, permanent full-time post at a university. That for them, for many, is the most prestigious job you could have, even as a language teacher.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose my perception of like what I would like the opportunity to be able to work at a university. Like currently, I don't have an undergraduate degree because when I left school, I went to the military, and then I left the military. I moved into language teaching. I did my DELTA, and now I'm doing my MA, which the DELTA was able to sort of go in lieu of my undergraduate degree, right? So I would like to hope that having the MA enables me to work in universities. But that's my hope. Again, you've asked a good question. What is a more prestigious job? And it's making me think now. I think I need to reevaluate that question. Anyway, we've gone way off track, but it's okay. It's okay.
As we do.
As we do. Okay, so we're talking about quite a few different things. We've talked about quite a few different things so far. And one of the questions that I sent you before was, you know, what troubles have you come up with or come across, and how did you overcome them with an ELT? Perhaps I'd like to break this into a few areas. Within teacher training specifically, any troubles there? But also perceptions of, for example, your name. Did you encounter any form of sort of native speakerism, even though English is your first language, but you have a Vietnamese first name? Did you ever encounter any sort of difficulties with that, and how did you overcome that? And any other random troubles that you've encountered throughout the career? So those are perhaps the three areas I'd like to press you on. So maybe we can start with teacher training. Any specific teacher training troubles or issues or things that you found difficult over the years?
Well, one thing that I found difficult, and this is really, I think, important for teacher trainers in future, is you have, in essence, two audiences that you teach. You teach your trainees, and indirectly, you're also teaching, you know, the learners that your trainees are going to teach.
Good point.
And I've never been in the German school system, for instance, and I don't hide that. I've always told my own students that I've never taught in the German school system. So while I may not overtly need knowledge of the German school system, it's important to know, what are school kids in Germany in secondary school learning, and at what stage are they learning things. So that's one difficulty that I've had to navigate. I've had to do a lot of work to, background research to make myself a better teacher, so that if I, tell my trainees, this is what you do and this is what your kids do in this year of school.
Right.
They value my input more, because, a lot of the time they say, well, you come from overseas and maybe it's like that in Singapore and you've got a different outlook. So sometimes there's that tension there. When I say, well, you can expect such and such from your students, and they go, oh no, but you can't do that. No, not in German schools. And over the years that has changed, predominantly because my daughter's now been in secondary school. The last 2 years, she's in her second year of secondary school.
Right.
In Germany. And that's spot on the target audience that my students are teaching. And it's, I find that it's so much easier when I tell them, when I draw in my experiences with my daughter's school and with her, and I share it with them, and I ask them, oh, how would you deal with it? They know straight away what I'm talking about. So, I have those real life examples. So that's related to teacher training.
I think I think you've touched on a very, very important aspect, not only of teaching, but also not only of training, but also of teaching, this idea that, we may come in with our ideas, but really we need to assess that local situation, that local context, and look to what's applicable for that, which is why often, methods fail in their approach, because they don't take into account that. And that's an important thing with training, like going into anywhere. I've done many external workshops, where I've gone into a school, and like yourself, I like to try and do research before, so I know who I'm going to be talking to with, and stuff like that. And not having that information before, I find the reception is often very different, because I have my workshop. If they've just said, come do a workshop on this, okay, we'll go to a workshop on that. But if they don't give us any information, it's usually targeted generally, and the reception is very different, I find. So yeah, that's a very good point. Something I haven't thought about a lot before. I suppose I've taught in Italy and in Spain, kind of similar in many aspects. And so my only training experience is in Spain as well. I haven't trained in different countries, so I can't compare. So I have, I've got quite a good understanding of where I am now, but I still had to try and understand where I was for the training that was taking place, and with whom I was doing the training with, which is another thing to consider, I think.
I mean, it's really not a one size fits all. I mean, I find all initial teacher training qualifications, well, the CELTA, the Trinity, others offered by TESOL, I find them very valuable because they give you the basic tools that you need, but what you do with those tools is very context-based, very personalized.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, that's a big point, actually, and no one else has really mentioned that. So I'm glad we actually touched on that. Any other things that stick out in terms of difficulties with teacher training?
When I first started here in Germany, in my current job in 2013, I was given a course called Classroom Language Skills.
Okay.
Right. Exactly. That was my reaction as well. And I was told, oh, so, you ask, so, and who are these people I'll be teaching? Oh, you'll be teaching students who are going to teach in secondary schools in Germany. And we have different secondary school systems. So in the summer, you teach students who are going to teach in the grammar schools, and in the winter, you teach those who are training for grammar schools, and in the summer, you teach those who are going to teach English in comprehensives.
Right. Okay.
I'm like, right. Okay, good. At least I know my audience. Classroom language skills. What? What is classroom language skills? That I tried to tweak it. Language skills for the classroom, and I back then had no idea what language skills for the classrooms was. So and that's something that I touched on recently in my recent work. I discovered, and I've tweaked it in such a way now that the focus is teacher language proficiency for the classroom. So things you do in the classroom. I mean, I wasn't too far off the mark back then when I bought Jim Scrivener's book, Classroom Management. I don't know if I have it here somewhere there. I wasn't too far off the mark, but it wasn't about management. It really was about language. So that was something that I struggled with for 3-4 years. We run the course twice a year because we have 2 semesters a year, but every semester that I did it, I wasn't satisfied with it. I wasn't satisfied with it because the course description was just really wishy-washy. It was everything and anything, and as I'd never done any teacher training before, I can teach essay writing, I can teach grammar for teachers, but this one course that took a long time coming. I mean, I could have written a PhD just about the course, and maybe I would have submitted it. But now I've got it. I think the last 2 years, ironically, through the last 3 COVID semesters, I've actually managed to tweak it in such a way that I
Brilliant.
find that it is now the perfect course.
Excellent.
I don't know if that would have happened if we hadn't had COVID, but that was one thing that really occupied me the last couple of years.
Interesting. Yeah, quite vague, classroom language skills. Just the title like that.
Yeah.
But no, but that's definitely something. I don't think I've ever experienced that. I mean, I've been asked to give workshops on something that I had to then go and research and find information for. But run a course specifically? No. That's quite difficult. Now, one of the other areas that I mentioned for troubles is, I mean, at the start you mentioned, you know, do people ask you if you're native or if you're not native? And I hate this dichotomy. I hate these things, this native speakerism. But have you? I mean, obviously you have a Vietnamese name or first name. Have you experienced any sort of negative reactions towards that in terms of native speakerism?
Not necessarily. I mean, when I first applied for my first job at Berlitz, and I really think it depends on where you've applied for. Right. You know, Berlitz is a big franchise. You know, you find it all over the world. So they did want native speakers, but they also knew that the native speaker wasn't white with blonde hair called Sarah Smith, for example. So brilliant. So they were very open about that. I think it really does depend on where you are. My students sometimes, in the early years, my students, when I first started teaching, my students would, you know, raise their eyebrows and go, "Ma, really, are you sure?" And they doubt, you know, my answers sometimes, or my pronunciation. That was also the students I had back then 20 years ago. They came from a generation where RP was very much the model of pronunciation in Germany. That I don't know if you know, there was that period of time in the 80s and 90s where you'd have teaching assistants come from, you know, England, not Australia, had to be England, of course, you know, and not any of the other countries, USA maybe, but just really England or North America. They come to Germany as teaching assistants, and they work on pronunciation with, you know, German school kids. So my students, when they came to university, they came from that generation where you had, you know, where there's either General American or RP. So and there was research into World Englishes was still very young. Yeah. Or somewhat young. So I had that. But now when I look at you know, my student population, they're not tall, blue-eyed, fair-skinned and blonde. You know, we have students from, you know, from former Yugoslavia who'd come in the 90s as refugees from the Bosnian War. I've got Afghans, I've got lots of migrant students from Sri Lanka whose families had moved to Germany after their civil war. Again, also a lot from the Mediterranean. Yeah. So I think my students have got, and also my students themselves have come out of a school system where their teachers weren't all called Frau Schmidt and Herr Schmidt. You know, so I think as a society, as we change, this will change too. People will be more aware that English is an international language and competency is more important than ethnicity. The only thing that really threw a spanner in the works was when, as a student, I applied to do an exchange semester at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. and I was filling the application form, and they wanted a TOEFL test from me, even though I'd written I've got British GCEs and my degree was in English. They still wanted a TOEFL test, and I said, well, I'm not paying for a TOEFL test.
That's crazy,
You
right?
know, exactly.
It's interesting because you mentioned, like not all native speakers or people whose first language is English look, for example, like me, right? Male, blonde hair, blue eyes, sort of thing.
Oh,
And because I recently, I think last week it was released. It was a short blog post about some of my sort of things that have happened to me in management with the consequences of native speakerism. And there's another blog post coming out for it's for one of the SIGs actually, AAP for Social Justice. I think it's coming out tomorrow from Tanina Baronello, and it's on sometimes viewing, rather than it being native speakerism being simply this idea of your first language is English. At times it's also borderline racism, or not even borderline. It is racism.
yeah.
So they have this perception that there's certain certain people of certain color or of certain ethnicity can only really be considered native speakers, which is really interesting, and pretty shocking at times, I think, as well. I agree that times are changing. I think, I mean, here in Spain, I manage a language school now, and we push this idea that we have qualified and competent and professional teachers. Some are native, some are non-native. It doesn't matter. These are the things that we need to think about, right? And on the most part, parents say they want native teachers, but then after the lessons that they've had with non-native teachers, they're very happy. And I think it's just managing those expectations. But times are changing slowly.
I do wonder whether, depending on where you are, it is a prestige thing. Because I have heard, for instance, it may be changing, but I have heard that in Japan, for example, native speakers are very much valued. When they advertise jobs,
yeah,
they want someone from the USA, in Vietnam, from Australia, or from the UK. And I do wonder whether it's simply for the institution a prestige thing to say, I mean, what else would you call a native speaker other than a native speaker? You couldn't, it doesn't sell if you say, oh, we've got a person from the UK teaching you English.
Yeah.
Right. So I think with in some places in the world, it is still a prestige thing to be taught, because they think that, the people who speak the language are the experts in that language.
Yeah.
And if you're saying it's from parents, then sometimes it's also, the old-fashioned thinking.
Yeah.
And I've always said to people, well, if you're a non-native speaker, I mean, I am a native speaker, but I learned English just like any other non-native speaker. We were drilled in grammar rules and stuff. And I've always told teachers, to own it and to say, look, I've learned this language exactly like you.
Yeah.
It's
something that we're slowly, very, very slowly moving away from as an industry, I think. Anyway, hopefully things change. Right. So we've spoken about, why, the what, the troubles, how we overcome them. We get to our well, actually, before we get to the advice section, maybe I'll flip one of the questions around. You're heavily involved in quite a number of TESOL related organizations. So, for example, ELTA-Rhine and the Teacher Training Education SIG for IATEFL. How did you get involved with that? I mean, because obviously, I think ELTA-Rhine is your local. I say local, but it's quite a large association.
It is very large.
I say local, but within Germany, like it's a large association there. And then IATEFL is, well, it's IATEFL. So how did you get involved and to begin to be on the committees there?
Well, I joined the association as you do. Like I said earlier, I believe that as a language teacher, and especially in higher education, you create your own career development. It's not going to fall in your lap. And I joined ELTA-Rhine. I'd seen that they had some workshops that I wanted to attend. And so the workshops were a member benefit. And then I saw that they were looking for an events coordinator. And I thought, oh, I could do that. And well, hey, I am doing that. And I've really, really, truly enjoyed it. It's definitely different from teaching. Also a bit ironical because I said I don't like management stuff, but a lot of what I do is, liaising with fellow committee members, with speakers, and managing basically everything related to an event. So that's how I got into the events coordination. And I just wanted to do a bit more.
Right.
To network further, I'd say, to meet other people who are doing similar work as I was. And there was a call for an events coordinator for the teacher training and education SIG. And I'd chosen this SIG specifically as part of my IATEFL membership because it was a tough one. It was a tough choice between ESP SIG and teacher training and development. I believe teacher language proficiency or classroom language, I believe it's English for occupational purposes and would fall under ESP.
Right.
But because most 99% of my courses were in teacher training.
Okay.
Right. So I felt that SIG was the best fit for me. So I applied and I got it, and that's been a lot of fun as well. And I think
how long have you been involved with these organizations now?
I've been involved with ELTA-Rhine since 2019.
Okay.
With the IATEFL SIG since May, just before May of last year.
Cool.
Yeah.
No, very cool. I mean, obviously I can't speak about ELTA-Rhine, but for the teacher training education SIG, it's been quite interesting. Obviously we had the pre-conference event, and we've got a number of I think it's every month now. There's like a workshop or something.
We're having the teachers lounge. That's right.
Teachers lounge, yeah. Which is really cool. I like these things. Hopefully I'll get to attend.
Yes, we missed you at the last one.
I know.
I like the idea of teachers lounge specifically for teacher educators and teacher trainers, because it's a good forum. I mean, you have forums for for teachers involved in business English, or for those involved in research, but there's not a lot of room, there's not a lot of fora where people involved in teacher training and education can talk about their work.
Exactly.
As part of CPD,
yeah. And that's probably one of the best things about being involved in with the SIG, is that community, and being able to find someone that you can spitball ideas with and stuff like that. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I joined, was to be able to do that. Because I think once you become a trainer within a local, perhaps it's different in a university context, but at least within a local context, it's generally people come to you to plan the program or deliver the workshops. And I feel confident with that, but it's always nice to be able to speak to other people and say, okay, how did you do that? Give me some feedback on that. And so that's what I was looking for, and to a degree, that's what I found. So that's been good. What advice, I suppose, would you have for teachers looking to move into teacher training? Because obviously it is a step that yes, you do accidentally fall into it sometimes, but there's that action to move, and there are also some people that say, okay, I do want to be a teacher trainer, or I want to try teacher training. So what advice do you have for teachers or EOT professionals looking to make similar moves?
Well, first of all, I'd say, ask yourself if you actually really want to go into teacher training, or whether what you're looking to do is more teacher development.
Right.
Because you could be, my definition of a teacher trainer is somebody who trains on, qualification courses, whether they're CELTA, Delta, Trinity,
Right.
qualifications, Pearson, or at university in pre-service education. They're, in and of themselves a complete program, and that's teacher training. If you want to be a teacher trainer, but give more one-off courses, have your own repertoire of courses like, teaching critical thinking, or grammar for English teachers, or communication skills for teachers, then you're more teacher developer.
Right.
You're more involved in teacher development because your audience is also different. You're training people who have already got their initial training.
Yeah.
Right. So you need to decide. You can do both if you want, because I run workshops as well, outside of my regular university teaching. You can do both. I'd say, because there are not many teacher trainer courses around, do some research, find out, just so that you can have a better skill set, because being a language teacher and having trained as a language teacher definitely does not automatically make you a teacher trainer. And I've had to learn on the job, put it that way. I've had to learn on the job. And when it comes to interviewing or applying for jobs, if you've got a couple of courses under your belt where you've taught teachers or would-be teachers, so even if you were just, assisting in a CELTA course, I don't even know if that's allowed, or you were, helping out at a school, helping local teachers, providing teacher development courses, put that on your CV.
Right.
Because that shows the employer that you know the audience. And as for becoming a CELTA trainer, they've got a formal path. You've got to do your Delta, and then you co-teach, you observe, and there's a
quite a lengthy process.
There's a procedure. But Cambridge also now have train the trainer courses that you could do, and when you have that, put that on your CV. So what you need to do then essentially is, after you've decided which type of trainer you want to be, is to then build your CV, build your experience, and apply when you've got, a couple of things under your belt.
Great. It's interesting. I don't know where I'd fall within that. I perhaps from your distinction there, I'd fall under more of the development. My job in our academy is I design the teacher training program based off needs, and we run the program for the teachers. So it's very much development in a sense. Although I call myself a teacher trainer, perhaps just because that's the role.
I think that's the role, and I think that's the term, because you don't hear, you hear of materials developer.
Yeah.
But you don't hear, there's no job title. I've not come across one that's called teacher developer.
No.
So it's teacher trainer.
Yeah.
It
is a good distinction though, because and to be honest, I don't know what I would prefer. Like, I would like to start doing CELTA courses, and perhaps one day even training on a Delta or TESOL. However, I do really, really enjoy in-service development and seeing teachers progress and making it very specific to their teaching needs in the moment. So that's something to think about. I don't know what I would prefer. Obviously, I can't say which one I prefer until I've done it. But that's a good point. Also, I like the point about promoting yourself. If you're doing in-service training, or you're running a workshop, or you're doing the train the trainer, put it on your CV. That's a great point. Yeah. Okay. Right, we've gone through a lot so far, and the last section of Spanish Chat is always book recommendations. Well, it hasn't always been book recommendations, but for the last 10, I think it's been for book recommendations. What book recommendations do you have for teacher training or in general? Normally we focus on teacher training, but do you have any for teacher training, or maybe you have that one special lovely book that you'd also like to recommend?
Well, I've got two books, and one that I keep going back to at the moment is by Diane Larson Freeman, From Grammar to Grammaring. It's usually here somewhere. Here it is. I don't know. I might have to change my screen. I've been going back to that quite frequently. Here it is. From Grammar to Grammaring. Whoops, can you see that? Teaching language from grammar. Yeah. It reads very much like an academic book. But I keep going back to that because I have this grammar course that I'm teaching, right. for teachers. And she, in the book, she presents a model of grammar as a skill,
right,
rather than grammar as an area of knowledge. And the book discusses how you can make grammar teaching more interesting. So it covers things like, or gives suggestions like, teach not just rules, but rules and reasons.
Mm-hmm.
It presents the 3-dimension model. It's not amazingly new at this point. It was, Larson Freeman came up, presented it in the 80s, where you're looking at form, meaning, and use when you're looking at grammar. And I've been doing that now the last couple of weeks, and my students have said that has helped them so much better. So if you're looking, for instance, at the form have got as a substitute, as an alternative for have, right? So I've got a cat, I've got 2 brothers. So what does have got mean? So what are its meanings? It means possession, ownership, also means characteristics. Yeah, my printer has got a double-sided print function.
Right.
Then the use. So when do you use it? You use it to talk about something that you have. You use it to describe a special characteristic of your printer. And I've been using that model, like I said, and my students have found it really good. And it's worked for them. And basically that's it. It's got a lot of questions that get you thinking about how your own view of grammar and grammar teaching. And I like that. I like coming back to it, coming back to the questions and really revisiting my own ideas of, rules. I've never thought that grammar is boring. I've never ever thought that because I like language structure, but I know many who do. So that's the one. If somebody wanted to, kind of rethink how they taught grammar, that's something I recommend. And the other one is by Tessa Woodward, Thinking in the EFL Class. Do you know that? And now it's thinking, not critical thinking. And let me just grab it here. Here it is. It's also not amazingly new.
In the EFL class, I've never seen it. Obviously, I've heard. I know Tessa Woodward.
Yeah,
everyone knows this. But in the
that's really good. It looks at thinking not as critical thinking, okay, but how it looks at our own processes of thinking. So if you're going to the supermarket in the afternoon and you're sitting there, contemplating what you need from the supermarket, you're not going to draw, for example, Venn diagrams, right? No, you're going to write a list, right? You're not. Or maybe you might do if you were comparing 2 supermarkets.
Maybe,
yeah. Right? So it picks up on the fundamentals of our various different thinking processes, right? So if I'm going to the supermarket, I make a list. If I'm comparing, whether I should cancel my Netflix subscription and get Disney instead or vice versa, then maybe, I think pros, cons, what do they have in common? So these day-to-day thinking processes and how they can be applied in our lesson. So it's not that whole critical thinking where you have two sentences. He was washing the car at 5 o'clock and he washed the car at 5 o'clock. What's the difference? It's not that kind of activity. You know, it's more thinking like getting students to list questions that they would have about a topic before you taught a topic, or concept mapping. Taken from, you know, from learning psychology. I found some really good activities. There's one that I like, where, you know, the everyday situation where you're on a train and somebody's on a mobile phone and you only hear that side of the conversation. Right. And then you kind of, if you're nosy, if you're curious, you try to imagine what the other person is saying. You try and draw some context. Those kind of activities. I like that. I had my students do that, and it worked really well because they were using language, they were thinking, but they weren't too worried about the, you know, am I using the right vocabulary? Am I, you know, using the correct tenses? But it's just, this is a real situation that we have. And yes, you know, as much as we maybe don't want to admit it, we do eavesdrop sometimes, and we do wonder, what are they saying? What's going on there? So activities like that to get students to use language.
Interesting.
So I love that book.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to take a look at that. It's got, sounds like it's got some, it pushes teachers to really think about the activities they implement and the thinking they get their learners to be involved in.
Be more creative.
Yeah.
Really, you know.
No, I'm definitely going to put them up there, and I'll put links to them as well. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for those recommendations. And thank you very much for today. I mean, I'm not going to keep you for too much longer. I feel like I've stolen a lot of your morning as it is. We have covered so much. We've gone actually a little bit longer than we expected, and that's completely fine. I love how we go off on tangents and we come back, and lots of food for thought. Got me to really think about prestigious jobs, and also how I see myself. Am I a teacher trainer or a teacher developer, which is a really important distinction, I think, and hopefully gets other teachers that are thinking about moving to teacher training to think about that distinction and where they'd like to do. Because I also think that that's an important career path. It's an important split as well, right? But I won't keep you any longer. So Khanh-Duc, thank you very much for your time this morning. It's been an absolute pleasure. I have no doubt that we will see each other again at pre-conference events, maybe teachers' lounges, and that's it. And
at TESOL France.
At TESOL France, in fact, in a few weeks.
Yes.
Which is going to be interesting. So for those of you that are watching, I think this video will come out in about a week or so, something like that. TESOL France, we're both going to be presenting there, so come see us, and that's it.
Do.
Yeah. All right, Khanh-Duc, you have a lovely day, and we'll speak to you soon. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.